Welcome back. If you had an idea exactly how much carbohydrate that your body needed to fuel your cycling, like would you take that and would you take that test? Today, I am really looking forward to this conversation with Isabella Bertold. She's a female cyclist with a history also working in sailing that I've worked with many years ago. And she recently took a test just to find out exactly how much carbohydrate she needed to fuel her cycling. And the results were a bit of a shock. So I was like, really wanted to get her on board and to chat about what she learned, what she found out, and how it's changing her practice on the bike. So, welcome, Isabella.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really excited to talk about this because yeah, as you shared, I was really surprised by
Yeah,
the results. And I thought maybe I'd be off by like a little bit, but I didn't
yeah.
think I'd be off by this much.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point because, I mean, the thing I've been doing for years and years, I'm always trying to get people to eat more, eat more, eat more. And a lot of the time it's like this resistance, like, no, I don't need it, I don't need it, I don't need it. And this culture in cycling is like, let's just fuel as little as possible. And it's definitely changing at the moment where more people are seeing pros fueling 100, 120 grams an hour. Doesn't mean we always need to be doing it, but it's like, what was it that inspired you to go and get that test for yourself?
Yeah. So I think it's sort of like curiosity fueled on two sides. Personally, obviously, on like the high performance endurance athlete side, I am very aware of the risks of underfueling. And
Mm,
it's something I've worked through in the past. We worked through that together actually as well in the past. And so it was like a good one. I wanted to just check in. I was like, well, if you can have an exact data point to make better decisions, why not have it?
mm.
And then also outside of sport, I work in the health tech space. So I'm always like, I think looking at new technologies, especially now around the spaces of like diabetes prevention. And
Mm,
so there's definitely, I was curious also of like, is this something and is this a test that could be done
mm.
by anybody?
Yeah,
On the at home side, like how easy is it actually to pull this off by yourself at home
yeah.
when it is something that normally would have been restricted to a lab setting?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, first of all, do you want to run us through the tech? So EXO is it EXO Analytics? EXO Analytics is
EXO
the
Analytics,
company
yeah.
that is doing the lab tests, and they mimic what you would do if you were inside a lab. And so there's a lot of universities using this for research. I've done it for myself, and I've had a lot of clients and athletes who have had the tests done, whether they're an elite or an amateur, to see how much fuel that their body needs or is producing at certain intensities. But those tests tend to be relatively short, I would say. Like they tend, in the ones I've experienced, tend to be with less than 30 minutes in durations. But the one that you did, I think, is a bit longer. So do you want to walk us through what that test looked like for you?
Yeah, so I'll try. I'll sort of give like step by step process. And there's some photos as well that I've shared on my blog for visuals to go along with any of this. But basically, before I even got changed into cycling kit, there's two test tubes
Yeah.
that you use a straw to like basically breathe into.
Mm.
And they're coated in something. This is where my science loses me, but they are coated in something and they're capturing data. And then from there, jumped on to a trainer, and I used my own bike because I wanted to make sure to keep things as consistent as possible. So we used my bike, power meter, all of that was consistent. And then basically you're riding at what most of us would know like a zone 2 pace for 90 minutes. And
Yeah.
over the course of that though, you're drinking in 15-minute intervals a really highly concentrated carbohydrate fluid
Hmm.
as well. And then I think it was only the last 15 minutes. The home kits basically they come with like a VO2 max
Yeah.
mask essentially that you put on yourself. And so
Yeah.
that starts capturing data as well. Hands down the most comfortable mask I've ever worn with any
Okay.
of these. And it was very nice to not have cords and everything attached at the same time. And then at the end of the 90 minutes, again, use two new test tubes and you breathe into those again. And basically, then all of the like lab stuff is processed in the back. So if you were doing the test at home, you'd mail this kit back where it's then analyzed and processed in that sense. And I think it was about like 7 working days to get the results back. It's a pretty quick turnaround thing on that sense and very easy to pull off. I think the thing that I was happy about was my water bottle actually had lines on it basically tell me how much to drink each time.
Yeah.
So that simplified it. But yeah, it was, I think, yeah, it was really easy, basic, straightforward, definitely something that you could do at home without much difficulty at all.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And as I was saying before, I was hoping to go up there and see the guys because they were at the same university as me, a couple of years ahead of me doing their PhDs. The guys behind the company, and I was hoping to get to do it myself, but I haven't had a chance to just yet. So hopefully in the next couple of months I'll go and probably jump over there, or they'll come over to see me, and I'll do the test myself because it's always like I always loved learning data because like I think same as you, like there's research, but it's like where do I fit within this research? Like we could be smack bang in the middle, or we could be an outlier where we need more, where we need less. And you went in going with that test thinking that you needed about 75 grams of carbs now. Is that correct? So like, and
Yeah.
what happened? What did you find out instead?
Yeah, so I've been, especially over this past season, tracking quite a bit like how I feel at different carb levels, different types of products, different combos of like whether it's in drink mix, gels, chews, bars, all of that. And so my guess going in was about 75,
Hmm.
which I was like, oh, well, there's all this like 120 like data, but I don't know. I don't feel good when I go to that level. And so it was, yeah, that was my guess. My range came back at about 110 to 128.
Okay.
And that's sort of like the band of it's the lower end, sort of they say, for the first 2 hours. And then anything above 2 hours is to push up to the 128, like 130 range.
Interesting.
Which that's way higher than I ever imagined.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And it's been interesting, sort of thinking through a little bit just like how I could change the type of fuel that I'm taking on to make
Mm,
that more manageable. And also just I've tried new products as well and different combos of the high drink mix.
yeah.
And it is, yeah, I was really surprised. And I think though it was still interesting to sort of have a little breakdown with Dr. Jamie after of just like understanding it. And it's like just framing it as like, this is what you can take on. So
Yeah,
it's still not like if you're only going out for an hour recovery ride, I don't need
yeah,
110 grams an hour for that. Um, and but it's sort of like, yeah, that's like the starting point in the range there. And so
yeah,
now basically like redoing my harder effort fueling, which
yeah,
for me it's perfect timing because it's sort of the wind down of the season. I have one race left. And so I sort of joke and say I have just enough fitness right now that it's like everything feels like it would be at like a normal higher intensity, like middle of peak race season
yeah.
to experiment with this without any risk. So it's
Oh,
sort of like
absolutely.
it's the perfect time to actually go out and be like, well, we've got this hard 4 hour ride with a bunch of efforts in it. Let's see how we go with this new thing. And if it doesn't work out, it's fine. It's like a really low risk time of the year. Whereas I think if this was like April or May, I'd be a little bit more hesitant to change anything right now.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on like a few really interesting points, the really practical points in terms of for not only like figuring out what works for you, testing it, putting it into practice, but you mentioned one thing you mentioned was about how you've been trialing different things because some things weren't working for you and were giving you gut issues at certain intensities. And did you have any of those gut issues during the test that you did?
No,
Okay.
no issues during the tests that I did. I think it's even for me, it's like it's not even just gut issues. It's like I actually feel like an extreme sugar high, like lightheaded rush, and then like the really steep crash after a sugar high.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I think, been my biggest challenge that I've been working to sort of overcome.
Mm.
And it was interesting though, like for the first time this year, I had gut issues in a race. And after where I had never had that before. And I was like, looked and I was like, oh, I was pushing like 120 to 130 grams an hour. Um, but I think, yeah, again, it's like, where is that coming from?
Hmm.
What are the other factors? How are you breaking it up between like different options and products as well?
Yeah. Or even like
Um,
the different types of sugars. Like that's the thing with
yeah.
trialing so many there's so many so many different brands out there with sports nutrition, and they all will say that they're the best product in the world. And ultimately, it just comes down to you, the type of riding that you're doing, your personal preferences. Some people like really sweet, really strong flavored stuff. Other people like more natural or more unflavored things. And there's certain types of sugars that are that really, really quick release, really quick absorption, and others which are take a little bit more time. And so this is like one of these many, many micro experiments that you end up having to do to like, okay, does this work? How much of this does work? And ultimately, like, what feels good to you is a really good marker for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other, just like the spacing of it through a ride too.
Mm,
I think one thing I've learned is I used to always have 2 bottles of mix on my bike. But then
mm,
it's like if you're riding and it's really hot and you're trying to drink a lot, plus then you're taking gels or chews on top of that, you're at
mm,
like maybe like double loading too much. And so I've moved to just 1 bottle of mix and a bottle of water, a bottle of electrolyte, depending on the day instead, just to have a little bit more control over like the pacing of
mm.
things as well. And so that's been a learning for sure as well. And but yeah, back to your the ratio one is huge, and I have now finally found a mix that's 1 to point 0.8 ratio that is like I love it and it works really well for me,
Yeah.
but it took a lot of testing of different brands to finally find one that, yeah, I think checks all the boxes on like flavor, sweetness profile,
Hmm.
texture as well was like a weird one,
Yeah.
that I didn't think of at first, but yeah, so it's taken time and patience, and now I think having these new fueling targets, it's like justification for all of the testing and the challenges I've gone through, and to say like, "No, no, keep going. You need to keep figuring this out and keep trying different things."
Yeah, and the other thing we were talking about before was the intensity, because just because you can and you're using 120, 128, 30 grams of carbs an hour doesn't mean that you need to be fueling that all the time. There's a time and a place, and it always comes back to like people will be like, "What should I eat?" I'm like, "Well, what's the purpose of this ride? Is it recovery? Is it training? Is it race prep? Is it racing?" And obviously, the more performance focused, the more racing, the more the higher the outcome is important to you. You want to be able to fuel as much as you're physically possible. Like that was a big part of why I did my PhD. I was like, why are people intentionally under fueling or just having this 50, 60 grams when they might be able to have 90, 100 plus and perform at another level and explore all the factors, which could be the gut comfort or the beliefs and all that sort of thing. So it is fascinating. It's not just this one size fits all. Just because you can use it, don't have to be using that all the time. There's a time and a place when it's helpful or not.
Absolutely. I think also, especially now as we move to like more fall winter time, if
Mm,
it's like a shorter ride or a really lower intensity ride too, like don't underestimate the importance of the pre-ride fueling of
yeah.
like before you even get on the bike. And like if you have like a really good like bowl of rice with egg or something like that before you set out on like a 90-minute ride, and then you come back and you have a really complete recovery meal as well. Like you don't need to have gels and shoes on the bike at that point.
No.
And it's a lot more enjoyable this time of year, I find, to have real food and to shift back to sort of the food snacks in the pockets as well, rather than just the
Mm.
high quick absorption sugar things.
Yeah, and I think so. I think you were saying at the end of the test that you do that there was a ramp test at the end of that 90 minutes. Is that correct when you did the test, or not
No,
so much?
no. So it was like basically what I call my like zone 2
Yeah,
intensity the entire time, just flat
yeah,
ride through 90 minutes, super consistent effort.
yeah,
I'm sure some people might be like more jumping up and down, but I do enough zone 2 work throughout my
yeah.
season that I was like very happy just to settle into that, especially on a
Yeah.
trainer.
And it's interesting as well, like that steady pace that you can do for hours and hours and hours, like zone two. Oh, it's easy. It's not that hard. I mean, at that sort of intensity, typically people are burning 500, 600 calories an hour, whatever the power output is. Because I've seen the data of testing from amateurs, beginners, pro athletes, and where some of my pro riders, like their FTP level might be 380, 400, whereas mine is like, I don't know, like 200 something. Someone else's might be 150. It's even though the power is different, the relative or the relative effort and percentage of effort is the same. And I think so many people underestimate just you don't have to be moving very much. Like once you're sort of riding much more than a walking pace, then you end up starting to use quite a bit of carbohydrate, more than you think, but it doesn't have to be gels. So you can use real food, you can use like sandwiches, you can use cake. I used cake on a ride just before this, went on an easy ride up along the waterfront, and I was like, oh, I've got brownies. I'm going to eat that on my bike ride instead of
Nice.
having a bar. And you can then include some of these extra foods without it being resulting in a sugar rush or anything else from your health.
Absolutely. I think I always save like a nice treat for the end of my efforts even. Like if I
Yeah.
know I just have like an easy ride back from wherever I did my efforts, it's like a cookie or a brownie, Rice Krispie square, something like that's like the treat at the reward at the end of it all.
Yeah. And I'd be interested to hear your perspective because, as I said, we worked together. Like, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, a long time ago, and a lot of changes that you made getting you to fuel more because that was one of the areas that you were struggling with at the time. And have you seen a change, like with the people that you ride with, where people are fueling more these days compared to even like 5, 6, 7 years ago?
That's a good question. Say I think there's definitely an awareness of the importance of fueling more. I think it may be also just like shifting where I am racing, where now being in Europe, I think it's like there's still been a shift in relationship, I think, with it now of
Mm.
you want to make sure you're fueling enough, but not 1 gram over. So it's sort of like it's like this obsession on both ends.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I think there's still a lot of learning, particularly on the women's side. I
Mm.
think for like staff and everybody in a team environment that needs to keep happening. And so like I'm glad we get to have these conversations because like things that I've heard is like, oh, women's races are shorter than men's races. You don't need to fuel as many grams per hour. Oh,
Yeah.
there's no way the intensity is as high. You don't need as much fuel per hour. Like things like that, like it's really common to hear that still. And I know like when I was doing the test we were chatting a little bit just of like how cool it would actually be to do this testing like throughout on a complete cycle to know
Mm.
like how
Yeah.
like can you actually see a shift based on where you are in your cycle on the women's side, and also talked about just like as you age as a woman as well, and so like if you're starting to get sort of pre-menopause and up, like how does your fueling change and the importance and like I think the added value of being able to do a test like this so
Mm.
easily at home and like just check in on things. But yeah, it would definitely, I think, to go to your point, like, yes, there's more awareness around fueling, but there's still, I think, just some barriers or maybe just with conversations need to keep happening.
Yeah, I think that's some good insight as to where the current position is because there's definitely been change and I see a lot more people fueling or being aware of it, being aware of the impact of REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport for both men and women. But I mean, ultimately the biggest thing that I see with people is fear around food, fear around carbs, and like I don't need it or like I can get away with it. And I think that's certainly where having tests like this making it available to show like, no, you do need it. And at this intensity, this sort of ride that you're doing, it's not even hard training. Like this is how much fuel your body is using. And that makes it's very much in alignment with what I would expect for a sort of zone 2 being around that. Using about 120 grams an hour doesn't mean we need to fuel that much, but it's like this is the cost. Like we're using fat as fuel, but the amount is so small relative to the amount of carbohydrate and glucose that we use. And there's a point that if we haven't eaten enough before, during, after that, we bonk, we run out of fuel, and our performance and our health and everything starts to suffer afterwards.
Totally. And I think that's like when you go through the whole experience of like learning what it feels like at the different stages, it's like I know now when I've underfueled a ride or like I
Yeah.
don't have a proper recovery meal after because like 6, 7 p.m. hits and I'm like, oh, I just really want some chocolate or like, oh, I'm just
Yeah.
so hungry. And so it's like you notice that. Whereas like if you're fueling really well
Mm,
before and on the bike, it's like you don't like high low sort of feeling around it.
mm,
And it's like yeah, I think that but like I was like, I do think it takes effort though of
mm.
thinking it through, of being like, how long am I going out riding?
Yeah.
How much intensity is it? Am I taking enough food? And then
Yeah.
always put something extra in your pocket.
Yeah. It's like the golden rule is like one, how long are you going for? What's the intensity? And then what fuel type suits that? Absolutely. Nailed it.
Yeah, I've actually put like a mini pack of Haribo in my saddlebag now. And I
Okay.
joke sometimes of like, uh-oh, I had to pull out the emergency pack to
Yeah.
get home today
Well,
because I
yeah.
got it wrong.
I think usually people have historically always had that emergency gel that's just traveled all the way around the countryside. And I find that so many times that people haven't used it because they don't actually like it or it
Yeah.
doesn't agree with them, but they didn't realize that, or because it costs $5 or €4, whatever per. So if you're like, oh, no, I can get away with it. Whereas, yeah, you can use things where it's dates or dried apricots or Haribo, any sort of lollies, sweets, candy that it's like it made it's not about it being like good or bad or healthy, but it's like, oh, there's a time and a place. It's the same thing as a bottle of Coke, the emergency Coke that you have at the petrol station when you're like, oh, I need more. Using these foods and these fuels, it sort of helps how you feel and how the rest of your
Yeah.
day projects.
I was gonna say, careful with the gel, because I used to have a gel in there, and I don't know how, it must have been, like, my multi-tool or something, put, like, the tiniest hole in the gel,
Oh gosh,
and
yeah.
so it, like, did the slow leak, and then to have gel inside, I was like, "No." When I was done cleaning that, I was like, "I'm never putting gel in my saddlebag again. We're going with, like, Haribo or something that even worst case scenario, like, one thing sticks to one thing, but to have
So
gel all in
sticky.
my saddlebag." So
I was like, I had
careful for anybody putting a gel in their
Or even like
saddlebag.
even if you make your own stuff. So like I had a bag of fructose that I bought from the supermarket because you can make your own drinks and gels with like yes, you can use like plain table sugar that's like half sucrose, half glucose, half fructose. That's what sucrose is, table sugar. And then you can buy fructose because you use it for jam making, so it's
Yeah,
cheap in the supermarket. And then you can buy maltodextrin online, which is then a type of glucose that's just it's branch chain. It's doesn't taste sweet, and it's probably the bulk of a lot of sports products out there. But I had a bag of the fructose on my desk here because I've often most of these boxes here are all sports nutrition products, and somehow it opened, and I ended up with like fructose over everything. It's just like it's so sticky, you can't get it off everything. Like I always keep finding like, oh, that's a sticky spot. Obviously, need to wipe that bit
yeah,
down a bit more.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, that and also, like, yeah, drink mix and, like, backpack explosions, all of that. Never good.
No, no, absolutely. So with the products that you're taking at the moment, like you said they're 1 to zero point 0.8 sort of ratio, and is that using maltodextrin or what is the primary fuel source if you know for that one?
Oh, I was to say, I should have had, like, a bag of it here. I don't actually know off the top of my head, but it's Endurance.
Endurance, yeah.
And it's the 90-gram, mix,
Okay,
the, like,
yeah.
bags of it, which again, it's like, if you don't want 90, it gets 4 scoops to get to 90, so it
Yeah.
makes it really easy where it's like, I want half of that, so just put 2 scoops in your bottle instead. But no, I don't actually know, I'm guessing it's, like, maltodextrin and all of the things that you just listed. And yeah, I think the other thing I really like is they have a lot of different flavors and
Mm.
also an unflavored version because flavor fatigue is definitely real when you're having it every single day.
Yeah, especially when I think what the thing I find a lot with people when they start training and fueling properly, because most of the time, like it is very rare that I tell people to eat less. It's almost pretty much 90% of the time, or eat more, but it's eat more at the right time. And especially in training, because when people aren't fueling training, we try and play catch up calories. Our body doesn't use it the same way. It's not the same thing. And so it's an effort to fuel properly. But if you're doing 20, 30 hours a week, like you will probably have days where you need to be eating 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6,000 calories, even as a woman. So
Yeah.
just want to put that out there so that it's totally okay for women to be eating more than 2,000 calories. I've got like a client who's currently on 8,000 multiple days a week. But then there's also days of the week that they're on 2,000 or 2.5. It all comes back to the training. The extra food goes before, during, and after training. And when you fuel your training, you get a bulk of it in the ride. And so then you're not having to try and play catch up and eat a 3,000 calorie dinner and struggle. But it is a bit of trial and error to figure out what products work best for you. And so I always recommend people to, when you get your hands on stuff, like just buy, I mean, I have boxes of things that always need to try them and like not let them go out of date because like, oh yeah, I'm going to try that one day. I'm like, oh no, this ride isn't hard enough. Like just use the gel Gemma, like, because otherwise it's going to sit there for another 6 months. But you taste it, you test it, and testing it more than once to see, is this something I can use regularly? Or because even like with a gel, you got the consistency, the texture is part of it. Like some people love really, really runny gels and other people like really thick ones you almost have to chew. So
Yeah.
you got to test it to see what you like, what works best for you. The the flavor fatigue is a big element of that. Like I find the longer the rides you do, I'd always be trying to get at least 2 or 3 different flavors. And if you can, amongst that mix, so whether it's gels, drinks, bars, sandwiches, whatever, to keep it from getting interesting. Because if you only have an orange flavored drink mix, for example, probably going to find by week 2, week 3 that you never want to drink that drink mix ever again.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Do you ever like what's your favorite mix at the moment?
Oh, they have a peach raspberry that I
Oh,
really like. It's actually super refreshing,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I was
yeah,
surprised. And
yeah.
then one that I was like really surprised by, and I was like, I'm going to try this, and it could be really bad, but it was cucumber lime,
Oh, okay.
and it literally tastes like, in like fancy hotels when they have like the cucumber and lime water.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
that's what it tastes like. And so
Okay.
that's how like clean of a profile it is. It's not sweet at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And that
Definitely
one though,
maltodextrin. Yeah. Definitely will
yeah,
have maltodextrin in that case.
yeah, but that one was one where, like, I went out on, like, a super hot ride last week, and I drank, like, my entire bottle of 90 grams in, like, 30 minutes just because of how refreshing it was. I was like, "This was great, but I've now already had 90 grams of carbs in, like, the
Yeah.
first 30 minutes of my ride, basically."
Yeah.
And so then that's, like, a really good like, I was super happy that I just had a second bottle of just, like,
Water.
it was actually just plain water of
Yeah.
sort of like, okay, I can like regulate that and have that awareness now so I don't like give myself like go up to like 180 or something and have like a huge blood sugar spike or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that one I think that was like a surprise where I was like, "Oh, this is really good."
Yeah, I've got one I'm using at the moment by Ministry. I bought a little sample pack to try, which is coconut water, and I've been super impressed with that one. 'Cause similar, it doesn't take it doesn't taste like a sports drink. It doesn't taste really sweet, and that yeah, it makes it easier to eat, easier to drink. As you say, like you've got to like it all comes back to what's the purpose of the ride, the environment. I find the more concentrated 90-gram super carb sort of bottle mixes are great for if it's really cold or if you've got limited time to eat, like in a crit or really high intensity sort of race. But if it's going to be really hot and you drink a lot, like I drink a lot, I typically drink at least 2 bottles now if I'm able to. But sometimes I have to restrict myself from fluid because I'm in a group and we're not stopping for 2 hours and I've got to make this last 2 hours before I can fill up. But yeah, it's always that sort of like trial and error and learning what works for you in certain environments so that you're better prepared next time.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that I started doing this year, is switching to 1 liter size bottles
Hmm.
as well, for training rides and back to your of like, yeah, that way you can drink a lot and still like you can regulate how much mix you're putting in and doing the math yourself, um, to get the carb amounts right in the bottles along with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know that you're a big fan of obviously of like health tech. Like what other sort of do you track your food or like what other sort of tools and systems and things do you find work well for you and your training when it comes to nutrition and cycling?
Yeah. So I a little bit less right now just because of the time of year that we're in. But I do use the Hexus app and
Hmm.
I've found that to be really helpful. Especially I think it's like in a stage race setting of just having
Mm,
that awareness of like day after day after day fueling,
mm,
and what the demands are like based on the different stages as well. And so I think that's been a really helpful one.
mm.
I think with anything sort of like sport tech, health tech focused, I always try and ask like, why are we collecting this data and what are we going to do with it? And what's the behavior change that's going to come from it? And so
Yeah.
I think there's so many things out there that you can track, but it's like, am I actually going to change my behavior from this?
Mm.
And if the answer for me is no, then as an athlete, I don't engage with it. And so I think it's a fun game to play, especially if you are really into tech as sort of a more on like the recreational athlete of like go through everything that you use or have used and like what actually changed your behavior
And
and like
why?
and why. Yeah. And reflecting on that. And so, yeah, I think Those are really the big ones for me. I think I try and check in too around sort of starts of different things, sort of like when you're transitioning from more of like a winter base block, starting to add more intensity in intervals. I do weigh food out at that point just to like
Mm,
make a check of like how am I guessing on my amounts? Am I roughly accurate? But just for me personally and my history with relationship with food, I try and avoid that long term. So
yeah,
it's sort of like a check in. Okay, good. Like you need a little bit more oats or a little bit
yeah,
less rice here to get back, and like this is the bowl that matches that, and then I
yeah,
sort of put it away again and try and just have like I think more of a natural relationship with food on that front. And then yeah, I'm trying to think of like anything else that would be like nutrition body comp. I think skin folds is definitely something that I'm a big fan of and an advocate of, just like again as a check-in point, sort of good side and bad side and fairly like accessible for people as well.
yeah.
Whereas like I know DEXA scans can be like really cost prohibitive if there's not one close to you. The
Mm.
consistency of it, I think, is more important than like how fancy the tool is as
Oh,
well.
yeah, definitely. I think I like that contact about the mention about the skin folds because I think a lot of people just fixate purely on weight as a number, but like your weight is constantly fluctuating and it could be high because you've got more fluid on board. Like as a woman, it could be around your period. It might be a couple of, for some women, they could be 2 or 3 kilos, maybe even 4 kilos heavier 1 week of the month compared to the next week. And so sometimes people will see a number go up and panic and get stressed and feel like they've gained body fat, whereas the skin folds give you that accurate measure of what is the composition like, and is it muscle, is it fat, is it nothing's changing? Because I've seen athletes lose weight, their body fat has stayed the same and they've actually lost muscle, and then putting all those pieces together to figure out where am I at, what's sort of going. And I also liked you mentioning about the food tracking periodically when it's a key moment for you, because I see that happen a lot with a lot of athletes. They might be prone to underestimating in certain circumstances or environments, particularly like races. And so if you know that on an everyday basis is not helpful for you, but for a race when I really want to focus, making sure that I'm on track helps me eat enough versus on my own, I'm probably maybe a little bit under on those days. Like finding all these tools, knowing yourself and finding what works best for you to achieve your goals and your best performance outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, before we wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom that you want to share with anyone?
I think my number one thing, like it's such an interest, like nutrition, fueling, all of that. Like there's so much information out on the internet and so many people share opinions and everything. I think my number one piece of advice is if you have a question, like actually go work with a practitioner in the space and do your
Mm,
research around like their background and who else they're working with and what research they've done. And just get like the right answer for you
mm,
rather than I'm going to call it like the Instagram or TikTok answers of like fads and what's happening. And like, yeah, as an athlete, like I love sharing like things that I'm baking or making
yeah.
and what I'm fueling with. But it's like that's what works for me. And like I've done so much work over the course of my athletic career to like get a bit of an understanding. And there's still times when I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing around this right now. And I need
Yeah.
to go and actually get proper help rather than like going on Instagram and being like, "Oh, I wonder what this rider's doing." It's like, no, that works for them as well. So yeah, I think just like being really aware of all of the stuff that's out there on the internet and then just figuring out what works for you and getting the right help and the right advice as well.
Yeah.
Would be like my number one thing to share.
Great advice. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really, really enjoyed chatting and hearing about your experience, what you've learned, what surprised you, what challenged you, and look forward to seeing how it helps you in the races that you got in the coming months and years.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I'll see you next time.